Les insectes, c'est des trucs pas sympas qui rampent, qui font des dégâts. C'est le cafard qu'on trouve derrière l'évier. C'est lié à des bestioles qui transmettent des maladies, qui sont des ravageurs de culture.
Le quotidien du consommateur, c'est tout insecte volant qui risque de piquer, on sort la bombe, insecticide.
Hanno meno sex appeal rispetto agli elefanti o agli orangutani o i panda.
C'est très rare que les gens s'identifient à une limace ou oui, une sauterelle ou une blatte, quoi. C'est beaucoup plus difficile.
Silently, the agrochemical industry is causing the buzzing to disappear from the planet.
This is the worst mass extinction event that the planet has ever experienced. We're losing species at a rate that Earth has never experienced before. This is worse than the dinosaurs dying off.
N'importe quel automobiliste qui a plus de 45 ans aujourd'hui, il sait qu'il y a un truc énorme qui a changé dans l'environnement. Tout simplement parce que quand on fait 200 km en voiture, il n'y a pas un seul impact d'insectes sur le pare-brise. Alors que quand on était gamin, qu'on partait l'été en vacances sur les routes, on ne pouvait pas rouler 2 heures sans qu'il faille s'arrêter pour nettoyer le pare-brise. Il y avait des insectes partout. Aujourd'hui, ça a complètement disparu.
The windscreen syndrome was confirmed by a German study. In Western Europe, since 1990, 75% of the invertebrate population mass has disappeared. In a cascade effect, it is all food chains that are now under threat. Rivers are being drained of their fish and the skies of their birds. To blame? A new class of super-powerful insecticides that appeared on the market in the 1990s, neonicotinoids. A chemical concentrate placed directly around the seeds.
C'est une révolution quelque part agricole, très pratique pour les agriculteurs parce qu'on a un produit qui est extrêmement efficace et du tout.
They say they kill pests, right? But none of them says they'll kill every insect that's out there, including your butterflies and bees.
While the scientific community is well aware of the dangers, these neurotoxins are sold to farmers as a miracle solution. Agrochemical companies and their lobbies have taken hostage all systems of scientific and democratic control. In the name of profit, a few chemists and businessmen have appropriated the right of life and death over all living things.
Les néonicotinoïdes, c'est vraiment un bijou de technologie aujourd'hui parce que vraiment la partie graine, c'est le noir. Là, juste autour de la graine, vous avez le traitement de semences. Ensuite, vous avez une couche d'argile. Et en fin de compte, à la fin, ça finit par une couleur qui est spécifique de chaque semencier.
These so-called coated seeds have invaded fields the world over. In the European Union, despite numerous bans, neonicotinoids are still being used. 130 exemptions have been granted. In France, this is the case for sugar beet.
Those seeds look benign, right? They're all colorful and everything, but they're highly, highly toxic. So neonicotinoids are systemic. Once they're applied, they move up into the plant and into every plant part. So they're in the leaves, in the stems, in the roots, and in the flower.
Et donc la plante elle-même devient insecticide.
À partir du moment où le neurotoxique est dans la plante, vous pouvez toujours laver les fruits et les légumes. De toute façon, c'est à l'intérieur.
The long-term effects on humans, and in particular on child development, were never studied prior to their approval for use. And yet, these insecticides are made from a well-known neurotoxic agent, the one contained in tobacco.
Tout le monde savait depuis très longtemps que la nicotine est un poison pour les insectes.
You know, for centuries, farmers have ground up tobacco and used it as a natural pesticide, but it's never been synthesized as a chemical treatment until the 1980s, when the Japanese subsidiary of Bayer created a stable form of this nicotine derivative. That's why it's called neonicotinoids.
C'est un chercheur japonais qui a fait cette opération finalement de construire avec 2 pièces de Lego, nicotine et acétylcholine, le premier néonicotinoïde.
For the first time ever, this former Bayer employee in Japan answers foreign journalists' questions. He is the chemist who invented imidacloprid. This neonicotinoid was commercialized by Bayer and has been used in the Japanese rice paddies since 1993.
規制の殺虫剤の何百倍も効くんですね。それでそれを検査する人ですね、生物を検査する人が最初その検査した時にいや間違ったんじゃないかと濃度をそれで何回も検査し直していやこんな何回も薄めても薄めても効くとこれは何かなるかなと思ってそれでその晩はもうちょっと眠れなかったですね。それでうちの女房に「やったぞ」と言ってあれしました。いろんな虫に効くんです。特に吸収性ってこう根を吸うこう針を出して吸うあれですね、それにはよく効くんです。
Il n'y a que les insectes qui vont s'amuser à venir autour de la betterave, soit la piquer, soit qui vont essayer de manger les racines par en dessous, qui vont être impactés.
Der Landwirt will ja keine Insekten töten. Er will ja nur, und das ist ja vollkommen legitim, dass seine Hauptfrucht gut wächst und dass da eben viele Insekten sterben. Das ist ein Nebeneffekt, der nicht beabsichtigt ist.
Le néonicotinoïde, en fin de compte, il protège en continu la plante.
浸透効性がありますから薬はその根元にしかないですね。こうやってこう巻くともう10分の1くらいしか根元に来ないですけど、そうですから非常に能率がいいと、作業が簡単になって能率が良くてよく効くと。
When they first appeared, neonicotinoids seemed to be the ideal insecticide. And soon a dozen or so molecules with unpronounceable names, such as clotianidin, thiamethoxam, or acetamiprid, see the light of day and are developed and put on the market by a handful of multinational corporations.
This product, after a few years of rollout, immediately became a success for the agrochem industry.
Syngenta tiene la solución perfecta para tu soja.
It starts with seed treatment. BASF. We create chemistry.
Really, there's only a small number of players. Syngenta, Monsanto, which merged with Bayer, BASF.
Sono I fantastici quattro, come vengono chiamati.
We're Bayer, and we sell those crop protection products to farmers all over the world. Not because we're evil, but because deep down in our curious scientist minds, we know that plants can get sick.
Globally, some 2 billion hectares of land are under cultivation, and the profits for the agrochemical industry are huge. From Japan, neonicotinoids spread to Europe in the mid-1990s, before conquering North America in the 2000s and then invading the rest of the world. From traditional crop farming to countless everyday products, such as garden rose treatments or flea collars, neonicotinoids now account for 30% of the global insecticide sales.
The neonics market is worth $3 to $4 billion on a global scale. You can find neonicotinoids a lot across the world, used on a variety of fruits and vegetables, everything from rapeseed to potatoes and beets to, again, corn and soybean.
That which seems to give neonicotinoids their appeal, namely their long-term effectiveness at very low doses, reveals itself, in fact, to constitute a threat to all the world's ecosystems. This Japanese lake, where a few fishermen still go out to fish for clams, used to be one of the country's most bountiful.
ワカサギというのはですね、この宍道湖周辺のもう代表する食文化でした。ワカサギの炭火で焼いて漬け焼きと、それから、お茶漬け。ワカサギはですね、宍道湖の一番のその漁獲高を誇ってた。もうマス網一網でね、多い時はこの船いっぱい取れた。船がいっぱいになるほどワカサギが。それが1994年、ワカサギはもう、急にいなくなったんです。ワカサギが突然いなくなって湖がどう変わってしまったのかというですね、非常になんて言いますかね、過去経験したことのないようなそのなんて言いますか、暗い気持ちになりましたね。どうしてかという原因がわからないですからね。
To explain this mystery, the local authorities commissioned a scientific study from the University of Tokyo. 25 years after the smelt suddenly disappeared, Masumi Yamamuro and her research team were finally able to identify the culprit.
水温も全然ネオニコ以前ということで水温の変化もない、塩分の変化もないかっていうことをいろんな過去の記録を見ていくと、ちょうどネオニコチノイドを使った時だったんです。イミダクロプリドっていうのが最初に水田用のが登録されたのが1992年11月で、初めてだから水田に使われたのは1993年のゴールデンウィークなんですね。もうその使われた途端に動物プランクトンがガタッと減りました。
These insecticides love water. That's how they get up into the plant parts. They love water. But if you apply them and the water is flowing past the plant, they also get into that. They love water, will attach to it, and so they're now found in most water bodies.
もうだから一瞬で生態系が変わりました。
All over the planet, scientific studies are reaching the same conclusion. This new class of insecticides is causing a brutal decline in biodiversity, even deep in the heart of the most protected areas.
Ist das richtig? In diesem Wald haben wir eben auch Fallen aufgehängt. Wir hängen sie auf im zeitigen Frühjahr, bevor die Insekten aus der Winterruhe kommen.
Ja.
Wir leeren die Gefäße alle 3 Wochen und dann kommen sie in 100% Alkohol. Und von dort aus können sie dann irgendwann später sortiert werden.
Since 2008, these scientists have been comparing the results of their collections year on year. In meadows, they have recorded a 67% drop in the number of collected insects in just 10 years. Their work is seen as an international point of reference.
Wir sammeln eben sehr, sehr viele Insekten. Also wir sammeln etwa 800.000 Insekten pro Jahr. Wir haben zigtausend Sammlungsgefäße und wir haben 2 große Kühlcontainer, wo wir die Insekten aufbewahren. Ja, und das ist tatsächlich das, was weltweit passiert mit der biologischen Vielfalt, dass zuerst die sogenannten lokalen Populationen aussterben. Der Verlust der biologischen Vielfalt geht eben nicht so, dass es Klack macht und dann ist eine Art weg, sondern dass es weniger Individuen werden. Dann finden sie keinen Partner mehr. Dann können Zufallsereignisse dazu führen, dass quasi alle aussterben an einem Ort.
Study after study after study after study, I could keep going, shows that insects are declining. They're declining in diversity. They're declining in abundance, which means there's less of them out there. When there's less of them out there, there's less of them to pollinate, there's less of them to be eaten by birds.
Also ein Rotkehlchen zum Beispiel braucht 700 Individuen am Tag, die es fressen muss, um eben da seine Nachkommen zu ernähren.
The current rate of extinction of insects, 8 times faster than that of mammals, is believed to be the 6th mass extinction in our history, and the fastest and most extensive of them all.
Ce qui était très intéressant pour moi, c'était de découvrir toutes ces formes qu'on ne peut pas apprécier vraiment à l'œil nu. C'est des petites punaises, et donc on voit un petit flocon blanc. Et quand on regarde ça sous le microscope, on dirait vraiment un vitrail d'église transparent. C'est vraiment des bêtes magnifiques. Et ouais, on ne s'en lasse pas de regarder ces bestioles-là. C'est un monde de formes absolument fantastique, quoi. Imaginez que les organes génitaux de ces bestioles-là, ça peut être si compliqué, avec des épines, des pointes, des organes en spirale dans tous les sens. C'est fou, hein, c'est fou. Cette bestiole-là, elle sert à quoi? Ça, c'est vraiment la question de base quand on a affaire aux insectes. Quand on parle de protéger des lions, ça semble plus naturel. On ne se demande pas, ça sert à quoi un lion? Mais pourquoi est-ce que ces bêtes doivent nous servir à quelque chose pour justifier leur présence, en quelque sorte, auprès de nous, comme si nous, on était l'autorité suprême, qui étions là pour juger les autres formes de vie et dire toi, à quoi tu sers? Oui, non, ça ne me sert à rien, allez, tu dégages. Enfin, d'un point de vue un peu philosophique, pour moi, c'est inacceptable.
Somewhere down the road, somebody decided that to be a good farmer, you were supposed to farm simpler and bigger.
Crop sizes started to grow. We started to grow what are called monocultures.
And as we went down that road, problems started to emerge, right? Look at that. It's a desert. They've killed it. There's nothing alive out there. If we can change this, we'll survive. I'm trained as an entomologist. I study insects for most of my career, and I run Blue Dasher Farm here in eastern South Dakota.
To help us understand the work he does on his experimental farm, this scientist first takes us to his neighbour's field.
So, This is conventional agriculture. This is what soils look like in the US. There's nothing, no life. See, it falls apart. When it's dry, this is dust, right? And the only way that you can grow crops in it is with chemotherapy. Fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides.
Plus vous avez des grandes parcelles, plus vous avez des systèmes qui sont mécanisés, qui sont industrialisés, eh bien plus vous avez de ravageurs mécaniquement, quoi.
Anytime you have a crop across a large acreage that's all the same, you have an insect that shows up and it's got an incredible ready-made nursery for all its young that expands over hundreds or thousands of acres.
And as we go through and we eliminate all of the life except for our one crop species, then we have to replace everything that life used to do. All of those functions, fertility, pest management, competition from weeds, disease management, and we have to replace it with a jug because we're so smart, aren't we? We've got this whole nature thing figured out, and we can package it up and we could sell it. This is what we're fighting against. This is what we're trying to produce. All right, let's see what we've got in here. That's a nice earthworm right there. That's a beauty. Look at that sucker. Get it. Oh, there you are. These are really important. Most soil is actually insect poop, in fact. So we need to get insects in here. Oh, that is what soil used to smell like when I was a boy. And this is like clay. It's dead. There's no life. Do you see the difference? How much complexity there is in this soil? Get back down in there, guy. You go back to work.
Oh, and here we got a bumblebee. Here we go.
This environmental activist runs the largest insect protection NGO in North America.
You know, that should be a wake-up call for people because these little animals are doing an incredible service for us day in, day out. She's gonna go right out.
On a l'impression que toutes ces petites bêtes qu'on appelle les insectes, il faut s'en débarrasser. En fait, c'est faux. La plupart des invertébrés qui vivent dans le sol ou des pollinisateurs nous rendent service. C'est un service gratuit dont on a bénéficié pendant des milliers, des millions d'années.
Senza impollinatori non avremmo la maggior parte del cibo che mangiamo.
Toute la faune pollinisatrice a son importance. Ça va être les papillons, ça va être les bourdons, les cirfes, les guêpes.
Sono responsabili della riproduzione dell'84% delle specie coltivate.
La valeur économique de la pollinisation est énorme. Un rapport de l'IPBES parle de 577 milliards d'euros au plan mondial.
If you like clean streams, invertebrates actually, many of them are filter feeders that are cleaning the water.
Au niveau de la décomposition, que ce soit des plantes ou des animaux, les insectes ont un rôle fondamental.
One of the most unrecognized services is provided by the dung beetle. This little beetle cleans our countrysides of animal excrement, which it rolls into a large ball that it feeds on and builds its burrows with. An immeasurably valuable task.
En Australie, par exemple, quand ils ont importé le bétail européen, donc vaches, moutons, les bousiers d'Australie étaient adaptés, eux, aux crottes des animaux qui étaient là. Donc, à kangourous marsupiaux en gros, et pas du tout aux bousses de vache ou aux crottes de mouton. Donc à un moment donné, le sol australien s'est retrouvé recouvert d'excréments et ils ont dû importer des scarabées d'Afrique du Nord et d'Europe du Sud pour gérer ce problème d'excréments de bétail.
I think we're really headed to catastrophe. And really, many of us in this field believe that we need to think about agriculture differently.
In the Po Valley, one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world, for almost 40 years, a quirky agricultural engineer has been proposing a radically simple solution.
Allora, questi sono appezzamenti che sono stati monitorati dal 1984 e dal 1986 non ci sono trattamenti con insetticidi. La nostra avventura è iniziata molti anni fa. Siamo entrati in aziende agricole dove abbiamo chiesto di poter valutare l'utilità dell'uso di questi geoinfestanti che ormai venivano utilizzati da tutti come se fosse un'innovazione meravigliosa. Abbiamo quindi suddiviso il campo in strisciate, una strisciata testimone, cioè senza nessun tipo di trattamento, una strisciata di un trattamento chimico standard. E insomma, prova su prova, noi continuamente trovavamo più piante sul non trattato rispetto al trattato. Guarda che spiga di mais. Come vedi, il mais è bello, guarda come è riempito bene, come la pianta ha dato una buona spiga. Il seme che è nato nudo e che dà la sua miglior performance nudo, senza qualcosa che lo disturbi, va meglio.
In parallel, Lorenzo Furlan has developed a system of traps to be buried in the earth before sowing, to assess the risk of pest insect outbreaks.
Utilizziamo le trappole per larve. Le trappole sono tirate su dal terreno e sono osservate. Queste sono tutte larve della specie Agriotes sordidus e in funzione del numero possiamo stabilire se viene superata o meno la soglia di danno. Nel 99% degli appezzamenti che noi abbiamo monitorato, seminato in decine di anni, non era necessario utilizzare un neonicotinoide, ma non era necessario utilizzare nessun altro insetticida. Non era necessario utilizzare insetticidi, punto.
Le même travail, en fait, a été fait au Canada, sur le soja, ou de la même manière. On se rend compte que dans 95% des cas, ces produits ne servent à rien puisqu'il n'y a pas les ravageurs contre lesquels ils sont censés lutter sur les parcelles traitées.
Quello che non è ammissibile è, per un rischio dell'1%, non è ammissibile trattare tutta la superficie con un impatto ambientale elevato, costi elevati e nessun beneficio né per l'agricoltore e neanche per la collettività.
I think the issue with pesticides is they've just allowed us to be thoughtless. They've allowed us to not think about what pests might be out there. We've got these chemicals, we'll just kill them.
En fait, les néonicotinoïdes, c'est plus une assurance, en quelque sorte, que des produits qu'on utilise pour lutter contre un ravageur.
Parmi, devo dirlo in dialetto veneto, parmi ase n'assicurazione. Buttare l'insetticida è l'assicurazione che il mio mais produrrà perché sono garantito che le piante verranno fuori.
So in farming we talk about prophylactic use, just using it before you have a problem to solve a problem that might be out there.
Nacque spontaneo dire ok, ti vuol un'assicurazione, te adagomi, senza che ti butti il vento. Cioè, ti do l'assicurazione, purché tu non butti, ti do io l'assicurazione, e cominciarono le scommesse. Allora, io mettevo sul tavolo, prima di seminare, 300.000 lire, 400.000 lire, che era il valore, se hai del danno te li prendi tu, se non hai del danno me li porti indietro e mi inviti a cena. E ho fatto queste scommesse in tante aziende, le ho vinte tutte. Questa scommessa di livello personale poi ho cercato di farla diventare una soluzione da proporre a tutti gli agricoltori.
Together with investors, in 2014, this agricultural engineer created a mutual fund that federates almost 50,000 hectares of agricultural land. This farm, as conventional as they come, was one of the first to follow Lorenzo Furlan's advice. For 35 years on these 60 hectares of maize crop, no insecticides at all have been used, a significant saving for this farmer, since in the Po Valley the chemical treatment of crops costs close to 40 euros per hectare.
Ok, allora scrivo 2040 per 60, 2400 viene fuori. Prova a mettere 40 per 60, 2400.
Questo solo per quanto riguarda il mais?
35 anni per proviamo a fare 35 anni per 2500, cosa farebbe?
87.500.
Grosso modo 87.500, con un costo aggiuntivo di circa 3 euro per ettaro, 3 contro circa 35-40 di un trattamento insetticida, e ha coperto, garantito la rifusione del danno, di qualsiasi danno che possa avvenire, essere riscontrato dalla semina del mais fino alle 8 foglie.
This fund has never lost money. Also based on this model, this farm has also been producing sugar beet for more than 20 years without using neonicotinoids.
Why are these chemicals free to sell? Why are farmers using them? The chemical industry put in every agricultural community a representative, a salesman.
In realtà la grandissima parte dei tecnici che entrano nelle aziende agricole sono tecnici che vendono qualcosa.
And these guys are at the co-ops or they're crop consultants. And this is somebody that these people, the farming community, grew up with and they trust. The more you use, the more you need. Who wins in an addiction scenario? It isn't the addict. Right now, farmers are addicted. It's the guys who are pushing the drugs.
Quand vous avez des industriels qui sont aussi puissants que Bayer, que Syngenta, que BASF, et qui vendent un produit, croyez-moi, ils ont la force de vente pour réussir à écouler leur produit. Pas parce que le produit est absolument nécessaire ou utile, mais simplement parce qu'ils veulent le vendre.
Neonicotinoids arrived in Europe in the mid-1990s and were first used in sunflower fields, whose flowering plants bees adore.
En fait, je suis née parmi les abeilles, puisque l'apiculture, c'est des deux côtés pour mes parents, mes grands-parents et mes arrière-grands-parents. Tout ça, c'est du couvain à naître. Hein, c'est-à-dire, on dit du couvain operculé, c'est-à-dire que bientôt, ça sera de nouvelles abeilles. À partir des années 95, quasiment tous les apiculteurs en zone de grande culture en France faisaient le même constat. Des abeilles mortes à l'entrée des ruches, des dépopulations de butineuses au moment de la floraison des tournesols. Moi, je me suis vue marcher sur des tapis d'abeilles mortes dans nos ruchers. Ça craquait sous les pieds. Si nos abeilles faisaient 400 kilos comme une vache dans un pré, on nous aurait peut-être pris au sérieux plus rapidement. Nous étions victimes, mais nous avons dû apporter la charge de la preuve. Donc là, il a fallu recourir à la compétence scientifique.
So, we'll just have to see how the bees behave, if they're hungry or not. I put just the smallest quantity, just a pinhead of neonicotinoid, clothianidin in this case. And then I embedded it in this little small dot of honey. 1 part per billion is that amount that I just put in like a swimming pool kind of situation. That's the kind of volumes that we're talking about here. So generally with neonicotinoid poisoning, what happens is the insect starts twitching violently, their tongues are everted. Look at that. Pretty soon her legs will be so tight. All of the muscles in her body will be so tight. She can't even move. All of the nerves in their body ends up firing simultaneously. And so really what they die of is exhaustion.
From the late 1990s onwards, the bee became the center of a scientific battle between the agrochemical industry and independent researchers. In France, the first studies demonstrating the toxicity of neonicotinoids on pollinators were conducted by Jean-Marc Bonmatin.
La première réaction des compagnies phytosanitaires, ça a été de dire non, 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 c'est pas possible, vous vous êtes trompés. Et de toute bonne foi, ils m'ont demandé de venir voir les résultats au laboratoire, ce que j'ai totalement accepté. Mais de façon surprenante, ils ne venaient pas s'informer des résultats, mais chercher l'erreur qui avait pu être la nôtre pour établir ces résultats.
La stratégie utilisée, ça a été le mot multifactorialité. C'était trouver des alibis nombreux pour dire que non, les pesticides n'étaient pas en cause. Les problèmes étaient liés à différents facteurs.
Dans le cas des insectes, c'est beaucoup le changement climatique, c'est l'urbanisation, c'est la perte d'habitat, c'est parfois l'éclairage nocturne.
Some papers would say, absolutely, the pesticides, this is the smoking gun. Others would say, well, no, I mean, it could have been all of these other things. And maybe it was the varroa mite, the varroa mite gets a lot of press.
The varroa mite is a relatively new parasite. It started to invade the hives of the western honeybee in the middle of the last century.
Le varroa, c'est le premier argument facile pour dire c'est pas nous, c'est autre chose. Le varroa, c'est un parasite naturel. Bon, il se trouve qu'il y en a une espèce de varroa qu'on appelle le varroa destructeur qui nous vient d'Asie et qui a envahi les ruches européennes. Mais le varroa, c'est un parasite de l'abeille domestique. Donc on veut bien imputer une part de responsabilité au varroa, mais certainement pas la responsabilité de l'effondrement des insectes en général, des pollinisateurs en particulier, et des abeilles sauvages qui, elles, n'ont pas ce parasite-là.
And so if a corporation or somebody with an agenda wants to use science to support that agenda, all they have to do is fund science that says something else is killing the bees. What happens is that the scientific literature starts to shift. And then you see this growing, swelling body of literature that says, well, the varroa mite kills the bees like this. And a lack of flowers in the environment kills, and there's a new disease, it kills the bees like this. And suddenly it starts looking, man, there's just a little bit of information over here, but there's a lot of information over here. Must be this stuff.
On peut commencer à parler de fabrique du doute, où le scepticisme scientifique, c'est-à-dire le doute méthodique, va être utilisé non pas pour consolider le savoir, mais au contraire pour le détruire, quoi.
L'idea della cattura della scienza è stata definita come una produzione culturale dell'ignoranza, c'è anche una disciplina che se ne occupa, che è la disciplina dell'agnontologia, come riuscire a far ignorare quello che la scienza ha dimostrato.
C'est fait pour finalement démobiliser à la fois l'opinion et les décideurs. C'est-à-dire qu'une fois que vous avez mis sur la table 50 causes possibles au déclin des insectes, eh bien vous ne savez plus exactement sur quelle cause jouer pour enrayer le phénomène. Ça nourrit l'immobilisme, le fatalisme et le fait que finalement on ne fait rien.
But occasionally you still get scientists that are noisy and they don't shut up when they're supposed to, and they continue to work down this road. Well, in that case, you destroy that scientist publicly. You know, it all started, I'd say, when we found that neonicotinoids weren't helping soybean producers, that they were killing predators and they weren't killing the soybean aphids. And got a job pretty well right out of graduate school at the USDA Agricultural Research Service. And I spent about 11 years there. Everything was going right. And I received an award in the White House for being named one of the top young scientists in the country. President Obama presented that to me. And then we started asking the wrong questions, I think. You know, the harassment started in small ways. Maybe getting some additional edits on presentations or on papers that never really happened before. And then it got more aggressive, and they started to suspend me for routine or small violations. Maybe paperwork wasn't done on time or something like this. And then they started to haul in my staff and say, anything John's done out of line lately? We'd like to, you know, and so they started to interrogate people.
While reporting this story, I talked to dozens of scientists. Many of them were fearful of speaking out, and many of them said that they would not speak out publicly on the record for my story because they were afraid they would be pushed out of their position, just as Jonathan Lundgren was pushed out of his position at the USDA.
The anxiety and the pressure was enormous. And so I really had to ask the question, what the hell am I doing here? And so I quit. All right, everybody. So they're going to be coming up right along here. So here we go.
Jonathan Lundgren now runs a farm in which he uses his scientific knowledge in the service of environmentally friendly agriculture, and to prove that it is possible to grow crops on a large scale while at the same time regenerating the soil. These pressures put on scientists are intended to slow down the progress of studies on the impact on biodiversity.
Les firmes agrochimiques savent parfaitement que l'avenir des pesticides, il est plus derrière elles que devant. Mais le tout, c'est de gagner un peu de temps. Parce que gagner un peu de temps, c'est gagner encore beaucoup d'argent.
We have this really rapid approach to approving pesticides. And then it's a glacial approach to getting pesticides pulled once they're approved.
Well, the best barometer of whether the chemical industry strategies are working is regulation.
C'est vraiment le cœur, c'est le cœur du réacteur en quelque sorte.
That is where the agrochemical lobbies enter the fray. Their objective? Block any and all attempts to ban their pesticides.
L'influenza delle attività di lobby dell'industria agrochimica si esercita più o meno allo stesso modo di tutti i grandi gruppi industriali inquinanti ed è un modello che è stato messo a punto dall'industria del tabacco.
For years, they said cigarettes don't cause cancer. They trotted out all sorts of experts that said cigarettes don't cause cancer. They delayed any thought on that by at least 2 decades by trotting out experts saying we don't have the data. And we see the same thing with the pesticide industry.
Okay, I think we're safe. There's a general message out there that organic foods are any healthier for you and better for you than whatever you get in the supermarket next door, and that's nonsense. If you go shopping in a Whole Foods, you'll see kind of why ACSH was founded.
La CSH, l'American Council on Science and Health, qui est financée par les agrochimistes et qui propage un discours qui est systématiquement favorable aux pesticides, aux biotechnologies végétales, à l'agriculture industrielle, etc.
It was formed in 1978 by a group of fairly high-powered scientists, and they were unhappy the way that science and chemistry and medicine were being portrayed in the media. Well, we debunk junk, that's our motto.
We see these organizations funded by industry helping shape public opinion, helping shape the discourse around these controversial issues. This is just a fascinating email from Monsanto. It shows a Monsanto executive making the case that Monsanto should donate to ACSH because in bold type, you will not get a better value for your dollar than ACSH.
You know, once in a while, throughout the years, we would get maybe a small gift from a company here or there, but that didn't stop me from going after them if I felt like they were doing something wrong. If you just say the word chemical, it scares people. These chemicals are in the water and we're going to grow an arm out of our back. These scares you would hear about different chemicals and drugs, most of the time would be false. But it makes great headlines.
C'est une force que l'on ne voit pas, mais qui participe, j'ai envie de dire, dangereusement de la démocratie contemporaine.
If you try and farm without any pesticides, it's going to be difficult. Everything gets eaten up by bugs.
Sì, adesso posso dirti la trovo un'affermazione al di fuori di ogni ragionevolezza. Cioè in italiano diremmo mi pare una puttanata. Non so, è una parolaccia però.
Quand j'entends des scientifiques payés par Bayer, payés par Monsanto, BASF, qui vous voulez, dire « Non, non, nos produits ne tuent pas les abeilles », eh bien, il faudrait les mettre face à leurs responsabilités et leur dire « Vous avez menti, vous êtes pénalement responsable de ce mensonge ». Quand j'entends dire « Non, non, ça ne pollue pas les sols », là aussi, c'est pareil, vous avez menti. Et c'est le principe de responsabilité pénale devant une cour de justice qui permettrait des condamnations, résoudrait beaucoup de choses. Alors, ça fait plus d'une dizaine d'années qu'on se doute que les néonicotinoïdes ont des effets de perturbateurs endocriniens. Et ils sont liés aussi à l'apparition de cancers sur des organes comme le foie, la thyroïde, les testicules, les ovaires. Mais ce qui est apparu de façon plus inquiétante encore, ce sont les effets sur le neurodéveloppement. Donc la façon dont le cerveau se développe dès le stade fœtal, puis chez le jeune enfant.
Les travaux les plus frappants, c'est les travaux qui ont été menés au Japon et qui montrent que dans le premier jet d'urine de la plupart des nouveau-nés, on trouve déjà des néonicotinoïdes.
だから私はなぜその水の環境の生物と農薬の関係を除草剤にしてもね調べてるかっていうと本当は人間にね影響があるからなんですね。日本で子どもの精神的な疾患による行動異常っていうのは1993年からガーッと増えてるんですね。
Si on suivait la science sur cette histoire, ça fait très longtemps que ces produits auraient été absolument interdits.
To face up to the agrochemical industry's billions, NGOs defending pollinators have to make do with very limited resources. Beatrice Robron-Marie has created an association to alert the French and European political leaders.
Faudrait mieux mettre un lien, non, cliquable?
Non, mais le lien, bien sûr.
Donc, du coup, qu'est-ce qu'on écrit alors?
Eh bien, Camille, si on disait « Ainsi, une seule voie peut permettre de sauver les abeilles », moi, si je suis ministre et que j'y connais rien et que mon attaché parlementaire, il y connaît pas plus, je ne sais pas ce que je vais accepter.
In the early 2010s, after more than 15 years of struggle, NGOs like hers believed they had won. 3 of the main neonicotinoids were to be banned, and the EU was about to introduce a new risk assessment system.
En 2013, l'EFSA, donc l'autorité réglementaire européenne, a fait travailler un groupe d'experts indépendants pour les autorisations de mise sur le marché. Et ce groupe d'experts a rendu un avis de 250 pages pour dire que ces tests sont aveugles. Il faut recommencer.
En 2014, nous avons eu donc la présentation par l'Autorité européenne de sécurité des aliments des nouvelles normes d'évaluation du risque pesticide sur les abeilles. Et ça, c'était une immense victoire.
Ce document, qui aurait pu être adopté par les États membres tel qu'il était, il a été mis sur la table à plus de 30 reprises. Et aujourd'hui, il n'est toujours pas adopté.
L'industria criticava il livello di protezione che quindi avrebbe messo in pericolo la commercializzazione di molti pesticidi.
In a letter to the European Commission, the Agrochemicals Union complained that 65 of their 67 principal products would not pass these new tests. For this MEP, classified as a person to be monitored in Monsanto's files, the lobbies made use of all possible pressure tactics at their disposal. This former chairman of the Pesticides Research Committee even suspects them of having hacked his email account.
On s'est rendu compte que c'était tous les courriers électroniques qui m'étaient adressés, qui contenaient le mot cancer, qui étaient déviés dans une corbeille. Voilà, donc, pendant les 4-5 mois de travail, tous les rapports que j'avais eus avec les professeurs, les chercheurs, les scientifiques ou autres, parce qu'on c'était au cœur de la problématique, la question du cancer est posée en matière de santé humaine et de l'impact des pesticides, ne m'étaient pas parvenus.
In the end, the agrochemical industry succeeded in stripping the reform of any substance. The most accurate toxicity tests simply disappeared, and the accepted mortality rates for insects were greatly increased.
Entre un parlementaire allemand qui a sur son territoire une industrie comme celle de Bayer, producteur mondial de produits phytopharmaceutiques, et qui du coup génère de l'économie, certes mondiale, mais également locale et territoriale. Et en termes d'emploi, c'est bien sûr loin d'être négligeable. Donc je peux entendre, pas le comprendre, mais entendre un parlementaire allemand qui n'a pas une vision holistique de la problématique, de dire, attendez, on ne va pas supprimer la vente des pesticides parce que ça va mettre en péril des centaines, voire des milliers d'emplois.
Quindi noi ancora utilizziamo uno schema di valutazione del rischio che è totalmente obsoleto.
Even France, which had defended the reform, backtracked and reintroduced neonicotinoids by way of exemption in 2020.
La réautorisation en France des néonicotinoïdes a été pour les apiculteurs un coup de massue.
Una sconfitta per l'ambiente, c'è sicuramente un grande passo indietro che viene fatto a livello europeo e che è un passo indietro giuridico, scientifico e democratico anche probabilmente.
Without reform of its risk assessment system, Europe remains vulnerable to the arrival on the market of new molecules that are already replacing the old generation of neonicotinoids, like sulfohexaflor or fluppyradifuron.
Those chemical companies right now know that these chemicals have a certain shelf life. So they're developing new ones. We're fighting to pull off these old ones.
E noi abbiamo esperienza in tanti anni, il prodotto che dopo tanto lavoro siamo riusciti a fare uscire dalla porta è spesso rientrato dalla finestra.
L'utilisation des insecticides et des pesticides, on sait très bien que c'est une course sans fin.
We use more insecticides now than we ever had in human history. We have to, as humans, take action because it's a crime against our children. It's a crime against our grandchildren.
In Japan or the United States, neonicotinoids have never been banned. In developing countries, the use of these chemicals facilitates the expansion of intensive monoculture farming, which in turn contributes to continued deforestation and the eradication of millions of invertebrate species.